I'll hand it over to Kristen to kind of get us started.
Yes, well, welcome to the first of the Houston group, nonprofit group for 2022. Just do a welcome of, who you are and where you work. And then I thought maybe we could share a project that we are currently working on, or one that we've just finished. I will start. I'm Kristen Deppy. I work for Baker Ripley here in Houston, and I am currently mapping out where our community center members reside by zip code in order to try and get a partner to help sponsor family memberships. So I have been working on that actually currently right now. And we can just popcorn. Jessica, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kristen. So I'm Jessica Davison. I work at United Way. I'm Director of Learning Analytics and Compliance. And my Tableau project recently was I added into our interactive regional dashboard all of our funded partners. So I created a kind of a search engine, if you will, to where you could search by funded partner name, organization name. You could look at it by program category they were funded, by the service that they were funded, or by the region they were funded. And so I kind of built that into the data story that I already had on all the regions. So that way they could really see kind of who was funded where to help answer that question, since we got that quite a bit. They went into, everybody wants to know who's funded where. So that was my latest project. And I'll pass it over to Mingyu Liu.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mingyu. I recently joined United Way Greater Houston. I work with Jessica. I report to her. My recent project should be the interactive dashboards I built for Rice University. I worked there as a university research analyst for almost 2 years. So we use all sorts of student data, faculty data to build dashboards to show how Rice is doing, Rice students, how they are doing, how their faculty are doing. So that was my, that was my recent projects. Thank you.
Hey, welcome. Hey, Paula, how's it going?
Hey, how are you? I guess I can go next.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I am Paula Balbonten. I'm the Program and Development Manager at Urban Harvest. My work here focuses on program evaluation, grant writing, grant reporting, and I learned how to use Tableau right after I came in here. They've been wanting to use it for a while, but they didn't know how to, so I started the project here. I built a couple of dashboards. I got certified, and then the most recent dashboard that I've been working on, it's for one of our programs called the Edible Academy. It's a train the trainer for educators, focusing on mostly like low-income, low-access schools, or Title I schools too. So I got to build a dashboard to show the impact of our program across years. Now, after 2 years that I've been here, I've been collecting data, and now we were able to see the impact for the past 2 years. And then based on that, I got to present it to our executive leadership, and we're gonna make some changes in the revenue model to make it more impactful and more cost efficient for our organization. So it was really cool, and I can how helpful your training, Jessica, has been. I feel so much more confident now to share our dashboards, and they're definitely getting better. So thank you. I'll pass it on to who hasn't been, Samuel.
Hi, my name is Sam Epley. I'll be presenting later today, but I just joined Tableau Salesforce as a lead solution engineer on Monday. And in terms of recent projects, nothing related to actually working at Tableau Salesforce yet, but building out a dummy dashboard for several different industries, one in the hotel and tourism and hospitality arena, another within defense and government contracting, just to provide some visibility or capability around what can Tableau do, with some clean and polished dashboards that are published at the Tableau Public.
Very nice. Thank you, everybody. Well, we have 4 $25 gift cards that usually we do the spin the wheel, but I don't think we need to do that today. I'll be Oprah. Everybody gets a dashboard or gift card. Everybody gets a gift card.
Everyone's
So
a
with
winner.
that, yes, everyone's a winner. So with that, if you want to just give you need email, Jessica. Is that how you give them?
Yeah, I'll send it over to everybody via email. Yeah, I'm so glad you got your Oprah moment, Kristen. Like, I'm so glad you got that.
I have always wanted that.
Good. I'm so glad. Great. Cool. So we'll keep going and I'll introduce Sam so we can get to the meat of everything. So Sam Epley, welcome to our small but mighty Tableau user group. So Sam has been using Tableau since March 2020. As an active member of the Data Fam, he was recently featured as a Tableau Public featured author. Congratulations. Is a Tableau Desktop Certified Data Analyst and Professional and has co-led the Twin Cities Tableau user group. He started using Tableau Public to improve his skills and develop a data visualization portfolio. 3 of his visualizations have been selected by Tableau Public as the #VOTD, Viz of the Day, and his work has been featured in Sports Viz Sunday, weekly roundups. Outside of Tableau Public, he spends time with his wife and 3 children and serves in the Minnesota Army National Guard. So thank you for your service. And he enjoys watching sports, reading, and listening to music. So we're going to hand it over to Sam.
Awesome. Thank you. Let me see if I can figure out how to share it in Zoom. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, you're all set.
Perfect. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody, or if you're on the West Coast, good morning, or if you're around the world, good evening. My name is Sam Epley, and today I'm going to be sharing the process that I've worked with and developed over the course of the past couple of years, learning how to effectively develop and design dashboards that communicate data very clearly using Tableau. So today's agenda, I'm going to talk through a really quick disclaimer kind of about the process as a whole, share a little bit about me. Jessica had already touched on that a little bit, and then walk through my process. And that part of that process includes an example from a Makeover Monday exercise from 2019. That was the American Time Use Survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And then I'm going to share my favorite Tableau resources. Some of those are Tableau Public related, and then open it up for Q&A. So quick disclaimer. So the process that I'm going to share here a little bit later on is one that I've developed over the course of my career in data and analytics over the course of the last 9 years, almost a decade now. And it reflects my views personally around dashboard design and doesn't represent the views of any one specific organization, group, or person. It's been influenced by a lot of different people, a lot of different books, a lot of different blogs, YouTube channels, tutorials, and whatnot. From around the data visualization community. So a little bit about me. So I live in the Western Metro of Minneapolis in a town called Hopkins, Minnesota. I'm married to my wife, Jessica, and we've got 3 kids. They are, 5, 4, and just over 10 months. So they keep us very busy. And in the upper left picture that you can see there, is a picture of my wife and I with our 2 oldest. At the time, our daughter, who was probably about 4 or 5 months old, we had just bought a house and she was sleeping in her car seat. And best practice, don't wake a sleeping baby for a family photo or a photo op. Just let them get their sleep. So with that, I also serve in the Minnesota Army National Guard. I'm set to commission as a 2nd lieutenant finance officer in August. I've been working in data and analytics for almost a decade now, and Tableau focused consulting work since March of 2020. Heavily involved in the Tableau community data fam, over 390 Tableau public visualizations that I have out there in my portfolio. January was selected as a Tableau Public featured author, 3 of my viz as Viz of the Day. And then I regularly participate in Workout Wednesday, Back to Viz Basics. A lot of my work gets featured in the weekly roundups with Sports Viz Sunday. And then Makeover Monday, even though it's no longer actively managed or run by Andy Kriebel or Eva Murray, I still will occasionally go back, and if I want a little bit of a workout or an exercise, I'll do a Makeover Monday challenge. So moving on to the dashboard design process, this is kind of a 7-stage process that I'll be touching on lightly here, and then going into each of the individual steps here piece by piece. But really at a very high level, it's important to understand first and foremost who your audience is and what is it that they need to know. Because if you don't know your audience, you may not be able to effectively communicate with them in a way that satisfies. If you're developing a dashboard for somebody and you don't know what they need, it's very hard to do that effectively. The next stage, once you understand who your audience is gathering data. So making sure you're using trustworthy sources and whatnot. Then once you have data, being able to explore and identify potential insights. And then the next stage is selecting charts that clearly tell a story so that then you can communicate the information to your audience. Then step 5, using best practices to make sure that you're not inadvertently stretching the truth or communicating data improperly. An example that I always like to talk about is bar charts where the axis does not start at 0 or the axis is funky. Those are generally in some semblance of violation of the best practices for data design. Then once you have you've done analysis, you understand what your audience needs, you've got well-designed charts, then what you do is you assemble it on a dashboard. And from there, you've got a finished clean product, that a finished clean product that only you consume only helps you. So then that final stage is sharing your work, whether that be internally within like a Tableau Online or Tableau server, or into kind of more of the public sphere with Tableau Public. So first stage, understanding your audience. So it's important to understand who's going to be using your dashboard, because like I just mentioned, if you don't know who you're communicating to, it's very hard to ensure that you're doing the right thing and you're giving them the information that they need to be able to take action. So some questions that I generally like to ask are, okay, for instance, if I'm meeting with an executive, what are the metrics that they care about? What types of decisions are they responsible for making? Thinking about interactivity with a dashboard. Is this a dashboard where they're going to have it on their desktop every morning and they're going to be clicking and investigating and exploring? Or is this going to be a dashboard that's blown up on a 50-inch TV somewhere in a corporate office where you don't have a touch screen, you don't have the capability to click and drag and select or highlight, where it just needs to be more static, even though you could have data updating in the background on a fairly consistent basis. But just thinking about the interaction that the end user is going to have, and then as well with that, understanding what types of devices. So kind of the example of having a 50-inch monitor that you can't touch or interact with, knowing also are they on a phone? Are they on just a cellular mobile device where they've only got a very small amount of real estate to work with? There have been some instances in the past where I've developed dashboards and it's come out later after the fact that adoption to that dashboard has been slow because we didn't ask the question of, oh, are you going to be consuming this on a mobile device? What way are you predominantly going to be accessing this content? And coming to find out that an executive, it's like, oh yeah, first thing I do in the morning, I pop up my phone. I don't have to do it on my laptop, and I just scroll through the dashboard. And if you build out a 1600 pixel by 900 pixel dashboard, and you constrain that onto a mobile phone, you got someone scrolling left and right to try and navigate the screen, and it doesn't always present the most user-friendly experience. So step 2 is gathering data. So Making sure that you're relying on trustworthy sources and things that you can pinpoint exactly where the data come from, and how it's been manipulated or how it's been adjusted. Those types of things provide additional transparency or clarity, which inspires confidence that the data that you're reporting from is trustworthy and it's accurate. So know what your data means. When it comes to leveraging additional resources for that could include something like a data dictionary. And it's important that, if you've got a data set, if we think about the sample one that comes with Tableau Superstore, you've got different fields that pertain to different things. And when it comes to understanding, let's say you had an ID field of sorts and it's just integers. If someone interpreted those integers not as an ID, but as like a dollar figure or something, you would not be using the column as it's intended. So it's important to understand the data you have and how it should be used to effectively communicate insights. The last thing I'll touch on here when it comes to your data is properly citing sources. So giving credit where credit is due. And what that means is, if you're like the example we're going to go through here in a little bit is with Bureau of Labor Statistics data. And if you don't cite that, then you're kind of plagiarizing in a way. But then also, if someone has different data or different sources and they see your data, then they call to question whether or not your data is accurate or correct. So being able to point and direct to, this is, the American Time Use Survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics between 2003 and 2017. And if you can give them references, or if there's been adjustments to the data, you can very clearly state what tweaks or changes have taken place. That allows you to have the greatest level of confidence in the data that you're working with. Moving on to step 3, exploring and identifying insights. So this is where you've pulled your data into Tableau and you shift from the data source pane into sheet 1, and you're starting to kind of evaluate, what do we have? Are there certain fields where things are going up or down? And some of the things that I generally will look for are trends. So that will be changes over time. So if there's a date column of sorts, I'm trying to evaluate, okay, with Superstore, there's a sales field, there's a profit field. So trying to understand, are we becoming more profitable, less profitable? Is there seasonality with our sales patterns? And trying to understand how our business behaves, that can be potential grounds for some insights that can be shared. Patterns or correlations. So if you're looking at the relationship at a product level, for the relationship between sales and profit, to understand, are there certain products, for instance, that are super profitable and other ones where we are hemorrhaging cash? That, those could be potentially some things that you'd want to have some attention drawn to as well. Or are there certain regions or product categories where maybe we need to improve our marketing spend, or just evaluating, are there correlations that exist? So as sales go up, or as profit goes up, do the other variables also go up, or is there an inverse relationship? Next, values by dimension groups. So what the kind of the easiest way that I'll communicate this is if we just have a bar chart of a metric, and then we break it and slice that by, within Superstore, you've got product category, subcategory, customer segment. You've got a couple of different ways that you can slice and dice to try and understand where are certain dimensional groups, how do they differ from each other, or is everybody similar? Because if everybody is similar and that aligns with expectations, then that's something that doesn't need to be communicated necessarily. But if it deviates from your expectations, then that's a potential insight that you want to call out. And then lastly here, talking about anomalies and outliers. So let's say, for instance, that on a daily basis, hypothetically, we're an organization that sells $50,000 of widgets every day. And we get our daily data updates. And then this one day, our daily sales is $500,000. It's 10 times higher than our expectations. We can take that to our IT operations people and say, is this number correct? Or did a test or something get messed up? Because this is way beyond what we would normally expect to see. So making sure that our numbers are accurate, because let's say, for instance, you had a crazy sale and a brand new series of customers that just got onboarded that completely blew away the expectations. making sure that your data is correct and validating that it reflects reality are important considerations as you're looking to identify insights. If the data is correct, then those outliers or anomalies can also be additional story points for later on as you're looking to craft and put together your story for the dashboard that you intend to share. The next phase of this, step 4, is chart type selection. So based off of the insights, whether that be trend or seasonality or patterns, identifying the correct or kind of a preferred chart type to communicate these insights is important. Because if you don't use a good chart type, then it causes, in some extent, a degree of cognitive strain on your audience, where let's say you have a scatter plot with 15 different shapes and 15 different colors. The amount of information, even if you have a legend right there, the amount of information that your end user has to try and retain mentally to say, okay, that's blue and that's a cross, that means, and they have to reference the legend, which can slow down their ability to get a very quick visual insight. So that's the importance of it. A couple of examples, if you're breaking things up by dimensions, bar charts can be really helpful for both positive and negative values. If you use a tree map, I would discourage that if you have the potential for a negative value, because it's hard to quantify and display negative space. So just something to be conscientious of with respect to that. Values over time, you can use a bar chart for that. Other chart types that are used commonly are line or area charts. And then for those who have ever worked or been around like the construction management or project management type of world, Gantt charts are really helpful because you can see different phases of things and where they line up on a calendar. So you can understand how certain steps or stages can impact later processes if there are dependencies. When you're looking at geographical data, maps, Tableau out of the box has a choropath map, which is a filled map. And then you also have the kind of circle map where it's points plotted with latitude and longitude coordinates. Looking at comparison, so this could be just a bar chart with a reference line. Another variation of that is something called the bullet chart. And a bullet chart has several different series of shading that go behind the bar, which allows you to see how something, a specific value, is comparing against expectations or comparing against the target as you're going out throughout a year. Like, for instance, within the nonprofit space, thinking about fundraising. And if you've got specific targeted fundraising goals throughout the course of the year, and you've got certain targets along the way that you're attempting to hit. Thinking about distribution of values, this is going to be something that we're going to touch on a little bit with this specific example later here. But thinking about histograms and thinking about box and whisker plots to try and understand, are all of the values concentrated really tightly? Do they have an equal distribution? Density plots are another way of looking at it in terms of understanding how tightly are our data points, or how disparate are they? And that can help to understand our situation a little bit more. And lastly here, the proportion of total or part to whole. These are what I affectionately like to refer to as the baked good section, because we have bars, pies, and donuts. And when it comes down to this, parts of wholes or pies and donuts, those can work really well. However, if you have any more than really 3 or 4 different components to this, it can be really hard to consume it. So an example of that would be if you had sales by state and you have all 50 states. And you can see you've got California, New York, Florida, Texas, and that probably composes a decent chunk of your sales. And then you've got a bunch of little teeny tiny slices. I hail from the state of Iowa, a population of about 3 million, which is, dwarfed by Texas and California. So we probably have very little sales. So it might not necessarily be the most helpful to have 50 different slices of the pie. So try and keep that somewhere under 5 as kind of a best practice. Moving on to some data visualization best practices. So if we've done a good job and understand the insight we're trying to communicate, we can then select the best chart type in the prior state to make sure that we're effectively communicating the data. Another thing I kind of touched on a little bit here is a bar chart with an axis that doesn't start at 0. An example I'll use here. So family of 5 is where I'm at. I'm about 5'10". My wife's about 5'6". My oldest is maybe about 3 feet tall. The middle child's probably like 2'10", and then my daughter, she still isn't standing up on her own, so I have no idea how tall she is. But let's say that for the oldest 4, that I know their heights. If we start the axis at 0, we get a fair and accurate representation of how tall everybody is. If we start the chart at 2'6", my wife and I look like giants compared to my kids, where they look incredibly small. I would appear probably about 13 or 14 times taller than my kids, which that is not the reality. I'm not that tall, and they're not that short. So making sure that you're communicating effectively and not misleading your user. Another example of that is, let's say, for instance, you had 2 variables and you were showing, let's say, sunscreen sales and ice cream sales. And if you were trying to be manipulative with this, if you had sales over time, you could dual axis this and then flip one of the axes. So you'd say, oh, ice cream sales are going up and sunscreen sales are going down. A book that is really good at communicating about this is How Charts Lie by Alberto Cairo. Strongly recommend that book. I don't have that in my later resources slide, but I find myself kind of going to that. It's a very quick read and highly recommended for anybody that's communicating anything with data. So with that, thinking about some pre-attentive attributes and the Gestalt principles of human perception. So the way that our brains work when it comes to data visualization is that it targets different centers of the brain for how we process information. For instance, if we have a text table in Excel or a crosstab in Tableau, it generally, what's going to happen is it's going to activate the text recognition centers of the brain, and it's going to interpret it almost as if you're reading a book. Compared to if you have bar charts, pie charts, line charts, it's going to be activating the visual centers of the brain. And being able to design charts clearly and cleanly that leverage pre-attentive attributes, whether that be hue or size or enclosure, different types of tools that you can use so that you can communicate your data effectively. Important things to consider. So by this point in time, step 6, you've got everything you need for the most part. Now all you're thinking about is we've got 4 or 5 different charts that we're looking to put onto a dashboard. How do we go about assembling that? So we've got well-designed charts because we followed steps 4 and 5. We are thinking about padding in space. Something that I see that I was guilty of early on in my dashboarding experience was I tried to pack as much insight and as much information onto a dashboard as possible, where I'd have like 30 charts, and performance would be slow and it would be very confusing, and there wouldn't be a very clear user flow for how the targeted end user would be consuming the data. And there wasn't much thought that I'd put into, I want someone to enter here and get situational context and then move through and ask questions and get insight. So think about padding in space. Give your dashboard room to breathe. Other things that you can do are leverage text to provide context, as well as color to call out specific things. And that kind of goes to some of the Gestalt principles and the pre-attentive attributes. So leverage those so that you can be able to communicate extra things outside of what your data itself will communicate. And then incorporate interactivity. So thinking about the example of the 50-inch monitor at a corporate office where you can't interact with it. If you do have the option where the end user is going to be on their laptop at their cube or in their office, thinking about how do you want them to interact with it, and asking questions throughout the development process of, okay, so let's say that we've identified a region that's problematic and we want to drill down. What are the types of insights that you want to be able to see? So thinking through that and being able to encourage people to hover, to click, to filter throughout the dashboard using the visual tools that are already there. And then I kind of touched on this a little bit, but thinking about the user path. So kind of a series of questions that I'd like to go through are trying to understand situationally what is going on. And then, are there specific variances that we need to pay attention to where something is higher than expectations or lower than last year, or higher than last month or lower than a prorated target. So think about why are things happening? And then that's usually, in my experience, what I've seen where a lot of organizations will stop is they'll just figure out this is what's going on and this is why it is happening. But they won't embed that last stage or that call to action for how we can actually do something about it and how can we make an impact. So what that generally will look like is we get our, kind of a template that I generally will follow is, for a sales dashboard, I'll have some KPIs that provide situational context at the top, some drill downs, whether that be a map or bar charts or tree maps or what have you, to understand certain segments or groups where things are behaving certain ways. And then once we get to like individual line items or individual managers, then being able to embed URL actions to where we can click on something and send an email directly from the visualization to say, hey, Steve, what's going on with the central region, phone sales? Why are we down 40% year over year? And being able to encourage and guide targeted action for, I need to talk to that person, or I need to have a conversation with this team so that you can take corrective action before it's too late. The last phase of this is sharing your work, and sharing is a fantastic way to take the insights that you yourself as a developer have been able to have visibility around, but then also being able to communicate those to other decision makers or other analysts so that they can accelerate the data culture within an organization. So if you're doing something internally that either there's data privacy or data governance, things that need to be taken into consideration, Tableau Server or Tableau Online are, I'd say, two of the platforms that you'd want to consider leveraging for that. That allows you to control access, set up user groups, so that the right people see what they're supposed to see. And then from there, the right people are able to consume what they need to consume. And then it's safe, it's secure, it's protected. The second part of this is if your intent is to communicate this to a global audience, and whether, let's say you're working off of public data and it's, someone could essentially build what you've already built. And they don't have to have credentials or login keys or anything. And your goal is to just get as much exposure to it as possible. Publishing it to Tableau Public and having it hosted out there on the web. Tableau Public is free. It's a fantastic resource for people who are looking to share and communicate insights with data on a global audience. And Tableau Public has more than 2 million authors and more than 5 million visualizations that have been published on their platform over the course of the last few years. So if that's what your audience is, or it's public facing, consider Tableau Public. So moving on, now it's playtime. So Makeover Monday, 2019, week 23. So the data set here is the summary of hours, average hours of sleep per day, broken down by year, broken down by age, by sex, and by type of day. By type of day, I mean, like you have weekdays, which Monday through Friday, and then you have weekends, and the group or the segment for that is like it'd be weekends and weekdays that are holidays, because the behavior is generally different compared to a regular Wednesday compared to a Wednesday that just so happens to be like, let's say, Christmas. The behaviors are going to be different on those two types of days. And thus, the data source for this is the American Time Use Survey from the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. And what I have shown here is the average hours of sleep per day by age and sex. And we, based off of one of the things I'd mentioned earlier about best practices, this violates it because the chart starts at 7. So if you're thinking about this, then you're just, if the labels or the axis weren't here and you just were seeing the bar heights themselves, someone could look at this 45 to 54 and say, wow, these 15 to 19-year-old men are getting twice as much sleep, because how a line chart works is you're attributing value to the length of the bars. That's how the data is being encoded. So you'd say, man, these youngins are getting twice as much sleep as these folks between in their mid 40s and early 50s. What's going on with that? So while it is labeled so that you have some degree of safety with that, and at least the axis is labeled, it still doesn't leverage a best practice because someone has to double check or triple check that to validate their assumptions. So let's be like Buddy the Elf and jump into this. So let me pull up the visualization itself. So I have this published on my Tableau public profile. Now I'm going to walk through this and then we'll jump into the visualization in Tableau public on the desktop app. So Americans sleeping in on the weekends. So this is where I provide a little bit of context around the situation. So talking about how, let me zoom in a smidge. There we go. So providing a little bit of situational context around, most people aren't getting 9 hours of sleep on a regular basis, and telling a little bit about the data, Bureau of Labor Statistics, what the study intended to show, thinking about a specific insight that I'm calling out where, those over the age of 65, they're the most consistent sleepers. All other age groups sleep fewer hours on the weekends, on the non-holiday weekdays, and catch up on the weekends and on holidays. So then thinking about one specific group, so between 2003 and 2017, females and those between the ages of 15 and 24 had made the most improvement, but they have not been significant changes. So then encouraging some exploration. So we back this out a little bit so we can see the full charts and titles and whatnot. So using colors, this is a chart type that is known as a slope chart. It is a variation of a line chart where you basically are picking just the ends to show the overall change over the course of time. Because if you have a line chart, there's 2003 to 2017, that's a 14-year gap. So you'd have 15 points per each segment. You'd have a bunch of squiggles that might not necessarily be significant or eventful. So the average hours of sleep, however, to learn more and being able to interact with this and see the number of hours of sleep, and then being able to say, okay, wow, this group 15 to 24, this is reloading on me. So 15 to 24, this is the group that I called out up in the subtitle that talked about how they got a lot more sleep. They averaged just about 8 3/4, and by the end of this, they were getting almost 9.5. So that's a call out. And then we have a distribution of the measurements in hours of sleep. So this is looking at the average hours of sleep on a nightly basis for a selected group. So what we see is those 65 and older, they are neatly packed here right in the center. They'd have from a statistical standpoint, they would have a low standard deviation because they're all tightly packed. And then let's say that we want to explore that 15 to 24 demographic. We can see there is a gap here. And what we'll see when we get into the kind of a scatter jitter plot that I build, what we see is that these are, for the most part, all of the weekdays or non-holiday weekdays, and these are everything else, weekends and holidays. So you go from having the population that's 65 and older, all packed tightly to each other, and then a completely different group where it's totally separate. So, and these can also be broken out by non-holiday weekdays. And let me drop this one here. So yeah, what we see here, non-holiday weekdays, people don't get as much sleep as they do on the weekends and holidays. So I'm going to jump over to Tableau Public here. And okay, so we've got several different charts here. So let me unhide. So I mentioned that this was the line chart, and it is you got a lot of different lines because this is broken down by sex. This is broken down by type of day. This is broken down by year. It's broken down by age, sex, type of day, and year. Basically are the four big things here. So as you can tell, overall, there's a lot of kind of ups and downs and movement, and it might not be the most insightful chart. So moving on, this is a variation of a scatter plot. I call it a jittered scatter plot. where you can see the distribution, and it's kind of, you're using a sum of random. And what this allows us to do is to see the distribution and breakout and see visually where are things on here. So this group here that's selected is the 65 and above group. And what we can see is they're all fairly tightly packed here. And then you see the breakout of type of days. And that's what that's doing here. Looking at it from sex, there's really not a big difference. If we broke down by age group here, what we see is, okay, our assumptions about the 65 and older population, they're all still tightly packed. But what we get is this interesting shape where these are all of the weekend days and holidays, and these are all of the weekdays. So this helps to solidify our assumption that people aren't getting as much sleep on the weekdays. So thinking about this from the perspective of year, this is very similar to the line chart. Not a whole lot of value from it, so we won't use it. And then this is a variation of the histogram that I have. This one has the labels on it. But what this is essentially showing, so we have the overall population here in gray, and this gray overlaps it to show the specific subpopulation that's been selected. So we see that 20% of the measurements, people said that they reported 9 to 9.25 hours of sleep. So that's helpful information to know. But then when we focus in on that 65 and older population group, it's 38%. So that it is overrepresented in that segment of the population. So important things to note there. And then the last chart type here is the slope chart. As we go to put it together, we've got a couple of different dashboard containers to help us have this nice and cleanly organized. This is a background that's built out in Figma, which is an open source tool that's completely free. You can log in with a Google account and design and push out content at your heart's content. So that is essentially the visualization component here. And what I'm going to do here is jump back in to the presentation. And I want to share a couple of my favorite resources within the Tableau community, things that are not related necessarily to Tableau Public, but helpful resources overall. So I learned Tableau 2 years ago with Tableau E-Learning, Tableau's e-learning platform. That was where I learned virtually everything I knew as I got started as a brand new user. It is incredibly affordable for considering the value that it has, where it can essentially teach you the basics and some advanced pieces as well about how to effectively use Tableau and interact with the interface and the ecosystem so that you're able to communicate insights to an end audience. In addition to that, the Tableau knowledge base, they have extensive documentation, and their community forums are also incredibly helpful. So if you're trying to figure out, I'm working with this type of connector and I don't know why it isn't giving the data that I need to, or I'm trying to figure out how in the world do level of detail expressions work, and you're trying to understand that, there are forums and blogs and different resources out there that help provide some clarity to that. You fine folks are already taking advantage of this third bullet point by being plugged into a Tableau user group. So props to you guys for being here and being involved and building your network and being able to contribute to others that are present. So props to you for being plugged in. Next thing, this takes place next Tuesday through next Thursday, attending Tableau conference. In person, it is in Las Vegas. And I think tickets may still be available. I may be wrong about that, but if you're unable to book a red eye and zip out to Vegas to attend, they have it available on the web, and it is going to be completely free virtually, which is fantastic. So if you're in the process of learning Tableau and you want to learn more about the tool, more about the developments, on Wednesday morning of next week, I'm fairly confident that's when Iron Viz is. If you know what Iron Chef is, it's Iron Viz is a 20-minute contest where people basically have been given data. They've had a little bit of prep time to think about what they want to communicate, and then they assemble it on stage. And it's nuts. If you don't attend anything else at Tableau conference, I would encourage you to watch Iron Viz, because it's incredible to see what people put together. Following Tableau Visionaries, they are formerly known as Tableau Zen Masters on social media. I follow, I'm pretty sure, every single one of them, and they pump out so much great material, whether that's blog posts or YouTube, or they're commenting on people's visualizations that they published. So it's an incredible community out there. And I mentioned the community there, following the hashtag DataFam on Twitter. I'm incredibly active there as well. So if you tweet something with hashtag DataFam, I'll probably see it. But would highly encourage folks to get involved and to plug into the community, because that has been one of the coolest things over the course of the last 2 years that I've been involved in Tableau to engage in. So then moving over to a handful of Tableau public community challenges in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Workout Wednesday, it is a technical challenge where there are a handful of Tableau visionaries that what they do is they put together kind of where they set out specific requirements saying, we want you to build this type of chart, or it's essentially like if you received a requirement from a manager at work saying, I need you to build me this chart, and here are the things we can and cannot use. And it's a great exercise in building out technical competency. So in terms of Tableau E-Learning got me started, Workout Wednesday ramped me up really fast. So there's challenges that date back all the way, I think, to 2017. So there's hundreds of challenges out there for Workout Wednesday. Back to Viz Basics. It is a community challenge just started this year by Eric Balish out in Washington, DC. And it's essentially focusing on one very simple component of data visualization. So like one challenge is build a bar chart. Another one is build a scatter plot or effectively use color. So thinking about different ways that you can effectively and cleanly communicate with data, and kind of starting from scratch to build up that muscle. Last component is Makeover Monday. Makeover Monday, I think it stopped being actively managed about September or October of 2021, but I think it goes all the way back to 2014 in terms of data sets, or maybe 2015 of data sets that are out there. So there's like 300 and some odd clean data sets that if you're trying to work out a specific concept, or you're just trying to get some practice of, practicing my manager giving me a data set and saying, I need you to tell me the insights in this data. It is a great way to practice the skill of, I don't know what this data is. I need to figure out effective storytelling. It's a great way to practice that. And then I've got 4 books listed here. I already mentioned Alberto Cairo's How Charts Lie. That's not on here, but I'll throw it in and mention it again. Storytelling with Data by Cole Nussbaumer and Affleck. For anyone who's just getting started in data visualization, highly recommend this book because it's tool agnostic. I think most of the charts she builds are in Excel. So it's not Tableau or Power BI. It is just how to clearly communicate with data. Strongly recommend that one. And it also talks about pre-attentive attributes. And I think she also touches on Gestalt principles of human perception. So Big Book of Dashboards by Steve Wexler, Jeff Schaefer, and Andy Cottegrieve. These guys put together an incredible book that shows, I think it's like 35 different use cases of different types of dashboards, whether that's like sports management or hospital management or nonprofit work or a sales dashboard. There's a bunch of different use cases in this. So if you're thinking through, I need to build a dashboard and I am tuckered out and don't know what to think for inspiration for a dashboard, cracking open the Big Book of Dashboards generally gets me moving in the right direction because I get different ideas from seeing different types of charts. Makeover Monday by Andy Kriebel and Eva Murray. They wrote a book a handful of years ago that's a really helpful resource for understanding some of the principles I talked about earlier, as well as being able to understand what the challenge was like when it was actively run. So highly recommend that one. And then if you're looking for more of a Tableau specific 101 helpful tips and tricks book, I would recommend Practical Tableau by Ryan Sleeper. He has a sequel to that book, Innovative Tableau, that's more of like a 200 level course. So would highly recommend those resources. And are there any questions? I see that we have a handful of things in the chat, and let's see what we got. See if there's any questions here. Okay, it just looks like comments through it. So feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions or comments or anything along those lines.
First, thank you so much, Sam, for this presentation. It was so great to hear your process and all of your kind of insider of notes, right? Like that was so great. And I put the comment in there when you mentioned about mobile, like being able to look at the visualization on their mobile device. And that always trips me up. And I know you can go in and like update the setting, but I get just so in like the weeds about like, okay, I need it to be able to look good on a Surface Pro, on a traditional desktop computer, and also need it. It's the mobile device that is like my Achilles heel, and would love like, what's your process for making sure it's usable on a mobile device?
Yeah. So one thing that's really cool about Tableau is that you can set out mobile layouts and tablet layouts. You can custom create different dimensions, I'm pretty sure by device. So you can have a standard desktop layout that'll be, pretty much what every dashboard typically is thought to be. But then as you think about mobile, actually, you know what, we're gonna pull a Bill O'Reilly here, and we're gonna do it live. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, so when we go and let's just create a new dashboard object here, we have the option for phone. And what we can do with this is click on device preview, and you can do desktop, tablet, and phone. But then you can also within phone, so I have an iPhone. I don't know if it's a 10 or an X. I don't know, but let's say that that's the phone I've got. Basically, it fits the screen for this. And let's say I don't want the Tableau mobile app, and we would just want to interact with it as if it's the web. The Tableau mobile app, that's an app you can download on your phone, basically log in with your credentials. I'm pretty sure to Tableau Public, Tableau Server, and Tableau Online. Could be wrong about that, but check for all things I say, check documentation to be sure. And then from this, as you're thinking about the different dashboards and charts, so in order for you to put anything on the phone layout, you first have to have, it has to exist in your default layout. So if I just go to the phone layout, then it will automatically, based off of the order in which you drop things and the pixel location of the upper left-hand corner, actually defines the order that it shows on the mobile layout. So I'm going to create a custom layout here. And let's say that I want my histogram of measurements. I want it like that. And let's say I want to give this a little more vertical space, edit the height to be 400 pixels tall. And then, this is kind of the way that you go about assembling it in the event that you have, where you have an audience that is, they're using mobile, and based off of the conversations that you've been able to have, in terms of understanding what they need to see overall, a good follow-up question to that is, do you expect your desktop experience, or is there a desire for your desktop experience to be the same as mobile, or vice versa? Because if they say, yes, I want it to be the same, then that's where you need to be thoughtful around, okay, well, we're packing this much information onto this much of a screen. So thinking about like if you had KPIs running across the top here, and actually let me pull up my Tableau Public. Let's zoom back out here. I'll show you one of the examples of a dashboard that I put together that serves as a good example of that. So I'll do two here, that one, and then this one. So this would potentially be a good candidate for a mobile type of format dashboard, because it's very simple and it's very clean, and it's actually pretty small. I think the dimensions on this are like 500 pixels by like 700 pixels or something. So that's pretty small. But then thinking through, if you have this type of big, significant dashboard, then figuring out, okay, can we, as we have, we might not necessarily need to have this left thing as its own pane. So then that can trim off 150 to 200 pixels. And then we can also take each of the KPIs and cleanly arrange them. So we have the KPIs at the top, and then we have each successive chart below it. So those are some different ways that we could potentially think through how to convert a desktop dashboard into a more friendly, mobile-friendly version. I'm pretty sure that in 2020, I think it was Lorna Brown. She had a challenge somewhere between like week 20 and week 30 that was all focused, I think, around being able to do native mobile and not permit it. I don't know, I'm going to find it. I'm going to go back a couple hundred visits here. I'll get there eventually. But yeah, that's kind of the approach that I generally take towards mobile, is understand the constraints of your real estate and try and align the expectations of your end user with those pieces of end state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I wanted to see what one of my dashboards looks like on my mobile. I kind of cringe because it is, I need that real estate for some of it, but I guess that's a good question of, does it need to have that mobile companion? And if so, is it almost like you, which one do you build it for, right? Which one do you think they're going to? Because you wouldn't really want to have like two separate of the same, because they need to share that, like they're both on our website. So it's a little of that.
So one thing that's kind of fun here, and I know we're at 1 o'clock. Within Google Chrome, you can actually go to inspect, and there's an option here to change the type of device that you're on and then reload the page so that you can see how this would render on mobile. So basically there's a mask that is only present on the standard desktop layout, that when you're on mobile, that format, it's like hidden off the screen. So I think this is an example of that.
I'm so glad this session is recorded. Okay, thank you.
I'm happy to be a resource. So any other questions?
Well, there was some good chatter. There's some good appreciation. I know when you were mentioning a few things, and I know, oh, Paula, yeah.
I was going to say that I recently had to share a dashboard that I built for a desktop, and I knew it was our farmers market vendors, like 100 vendors and farmers ranchers. You know, they don't, I mean, they use their phone all the time, or they look at their emails through their phone. I was like, oh, I know that dashboard is not gonna fit in, but I just had to get it out of my way. So what I did is just like, I got rid of one piece of information that I knew they were not gonna even pay attention to it. So I was like, look, I'm gonna show you this chart, that chart, and that chart. I don't think you don't even care. So I just took it off. And for more information, use desktop. But yeah, this is very helpful too. And I love that book. I am trying to finish it. But thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
I got one last slide to show, actually. My apologies.
Great.
So Jessica had mentioned it, but if you want to follow me on Tableau Public, just search Sam Epley. I probably am the top result there. You can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Sam Epley. With Twitter, it's Epley Samuel. And then on Instagram, the Sam Epley. So feel free to connect with me. Feel free to ask questions, shoot me a DM. I'm happy to be a resource. I'm always happy to take time to help navigate how do we implement X in Tableau. I always love having those types of conversations. So, but yeah, I'll hand it back over. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. So that wraps it up for our session today. I put our link to the next meetup we have. It's in August, August 12th from 12 to 1:30, TBD on the topic, but it's always something good, always something that you can take back in and really use into your work with Tableau. So glad you are able to join. Kristen, anything else as we close out?
I just want to say thank you so much for the presentation. It was wonderful. Really appreciate the breakdown of the system that you used to create. Beautiful work.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Well, hope everybody has a great rest of their Friday. Great to see y'all.
Have a great weekend.